What I will say about Polygon 2.0 is you will have Polygon handling high volumes of traffic, producing tons and tons of data and low fees and with high degrees of accessibility, but they're still going to maintain that really tight connectivity to the Ethereum mainnet. Ethereum is always going to be home to powerful DeFi primitives and lots of liquidity. And I think Polygon is smart not to close the door completely on that. I personally believe that we're trending in the direction of...
Hashoshi, you're a Polygon fan, am I correct?
You are correct, yeah.
For the folks at home who may be living under a rock, what is Polygon? And I guess what is your investor's thesis for Polygon?
Yeah, great question. And funny that if you're living under a rock, because literally Polygon is everywhere. I think they do a really nice job of being sort of in front of everyone, getting into some of the use cases around gaming, etc. But what Polygon is really, or let's think about what they started as. They started as an Ethereum layer 2. Their whole premise was we want to scale Ethereum. And they're still in that boat, but they were interested in being an L2 before being an L2 was cool. Now we have so many different L2s, and so they've had to change their approach a little bit. And what Polygon has done now is become an Ethereum virtual machine compatible scaling layer, or a layer for everyone. Lower gas fees, there's more block space, meaning more transactions in each block, meaning lower gas fees, higher transaction throughput. Easier for everyone to use this for things like gaming, for broad digital asset use cases like NFTs, where gas fees on the Ethereum mainnet have become painfully high. One of the other things that Polygon has done that I think differentiates them in this space is they accumulated a pretty robust amount of zero knowledge proofs talent. And zero knowledge proofs, without diving too deeply into something nastily technical, you can think of zero knowledge proofs as a family of technologies for both scaling the blockchain technology that we use every day by reducing many different transactions into smaller proofs that you can validate thousands of transactions in one single proof. Very reductive, but you get the idea. And they did that sort of accumulation of technical talent for zero knowledge proofs pretty early on in the game. And so as a result of that, a lot of their tech stack now is predicated on zero knowledge technologies. They have what's called ZK EVM, which is a pretty powerful layer 2 technology for Ethereum. And they've just announced not too long ago in this summer, the 2.0 version of Polygon, which is really taking all the technology and all the diversion that they've made from that original vision of being an Ethereum L2 and kind of unifying it back to that core mission, which is scaling Ethereum for the masses. And all of what I just mentioned is part of that investor thesis. It's the accumulation of technology, it's the experimentation, and it's their, I think one of their core talents, the Polygon core team, is to bring together different builders to build things that are accessible to a wider audience, making things simpler to use. So I'll pause there. Those are some of my thoughts.
So this might be a incredibly simple question and could apply to almost any crypto project. Are we to think of it, the same way as like Ethereum, as users and dApps continue to build on Polygon and people transact in Polygon, the value will accrue to the Polygon token?
I mean, one could argue that in a general sense, yes, theoretically, if you have a step change in, larger and larger audiences using Polygon, that could be good for the economy of Polygon and its native coin. A lot of times the way that token economics are structured, and there's a lot of variance in that, you have to then dive really deeply into the lowest level of the protocol economics. What are emissions? Is there inflation? Are tokens burned? Is there deflation? What do people use those tokens for? And so to really figure that out, I think it's like calculus. And even when you have what you think is the answer, people interact with protocols in ways that maybe the creators didn't imagine in the beginning. And so their thoughts about what would accrue value in the token don't materialize. So what I would say is it at least appears to me that Polygon's focus is, let's bring as many people on as possible, and let's really rebase all of what we're doing and what we've done into a clear, cohesive message, which is going to create a sort of mega chain, multi-chain. There's all these little terminology that they use, platform where everyone can build and use at high scale, but still stay really close to the Ethereum ecosystem. Because I think, and I believe you're a fan of Ethereum. We know that Ethereum is not going away, despite those who may say that it is. Ethereum is likely going to be an execution and settlement layer for all of the polygons of the world for a long time. So I like that they're trying to stick close to that and derive either inspiration or security from Ethereum, or both.
Okay. I want to ask you about the big upgrade coming to Polygon, but before we get there, is there anything else to say on Polygon today and what Polygon has accomplished?
I think the only other thing I want to mention about what Polygon has accomplished is that they have really highlighted the difference between a true layer 2 and a side chain, or a network that starts as a layer 2 and kind of naturally becomes its own layer 1 or its own side chain. And the key differentiator is that Polygon, at one point early on, when I talked about them starting out as a layer 2 before it was cool, they originally had this idea of deriving security from the Ethereum mainnet. And basically you rely on that. You're validating your transactions down to the layer 1 for consensus and finality. They shifted to this, we're going to be our own proof of stake chain in and of ourselves. And that kind of turned them from a layer 2 to a side chain. And then they have the ZK EVM, which is a true layer 2 in the true sense of the word. And it is a really big point of confusion for people, because you hear these terms thrown around all the time. Oh, it's a layer 2, it's a layer 3, now there's layer 0. It gets very, very confusing. But I think the fact that Polygon exists has really shown what you do as a project, and how you build your technology determines what classification you have as a protocol in the space. And that's an accomplishment in and of itself, to pioneer that path, and showing that it's a fluid state depending on the decisions you make from a technical perspective.
Yeah, and before we get too far, just in brief, for the folks at home, Hashoshi, I know you, I follow you, I think you're really smart with crypto, but who are you? And feel free to brag a little bit.
Bragging's not in my nature, but who I am a deeply technical guy. I started out in the Bitcoin space. Well, I consider myself both a nerd and a tech guy. Maybe they're both the same thing. But I stumbled upon the Bitcoin white paper way back when, 2010-ish, and I was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And I just threw everything into research and building. Ethereum came into the mix, picked up Solidity, started building smart contracts, working with, taking client work and doing things like that. And started making videos and explaining these things to people, because that was what I was passionate about doing, even though I was a pretty introverted guy and was freaked out about making videos about stuff. But yeah, and here we are. I think the space has changed so much, both in good ways, and in some ways there's some bad things that have come from the explosion and all of the money that can be made doing this. And that's par for the course. I'm not vilifying crypto, but I think there's so much technical depth that there is in the space. The bar is so high to really understand what's going on. And my main mission, and I'm hoping, get the baby in a stable spot. I'm moving studios, but my goal really is to just continue to make content that makes the technical stuff make a little bit more sense to people, so that they can feel like they really get what they're investing in or what they're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. So that's me.
I'm following this guy. You can too. Linked below. My next question, Hashoshi, is Polygon's future, because Polygon is going through a major upgrade. Help us break that down. I even hear they're changing their ticker from Matic to Pol. What's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this is that final move from Polygon of the past back in their Matic days, which is what they used to be called, to Polygon of the future. They've started in one spot, they've moved in a bunch of different directions, and now they're kind of coming back into the middle, and they have their sweet spot where they want to operate. And so Polygon 2.0 is sort of like a 4-layer stack, which is rooted in that ZK technology that I talked about earlier. And so they outline this 4-layer stack for Polygon of the future as the staking layer, the interoperability layer, the execution layer, and the proving layer. And these 4 different layers of the stack cover at the top proof of stake consensus, which is going to stay core to their vision. That's where you have staking and validation, things you're probably very familiar with. The interop layer, short for interoperability, is going to cover the connectivity between these sort of mini Polygon chains that are going to be used as a mechanism to scale. Basically, they want to accommodate all of the world's traffic. That's their lofty goal, right? They want to be a blockchain where you can execute all kinds of different applications at scale. And so the interop layer is going to connect all the individual Polygon supernet chains. Really, it's just, you can think of them like little copies of Polygon, as well as connectivity to other public chains. Think about other Ethereum layer 2s, Ethereum network itself. And then you move down the stack, you have the execution layer. That's where you have things for the actual core functionality, the brain of the network. This is really where you produce blocks of transactions that formulates the blockchain. And then the proving layer is where all that zero knowledge, crazy technical, arguably kind of nasty technical stuff happens around generating and distributing the proofs that run this future that Polygon is dictating around zero knowledge proofs technologies. What I will say about Polygon 2.0 is that they're really basing all of this around the theory that you will have Polygon handling high volumes of traffic, producing tons and tons of data stored on a blockchain, and do that with low fees and with high degrees of accessibility. But they're still going to maintain that really tight connectivity to the Ethereum mainnet, to the Ethereum L1, both for reasons of security, but I think also for liquidity. Ethereum is always going to be home to powerful DeFi primitives and lots of liquidity. And I think Polygon is smart not to close the door completely on that. And that's kind of an homage to their history, which is we started with Ethereum as an L2, and we're kind of finishing not as a strict L2, but as a sort of sister chain to Ethereum. So that's the gist around Polygon. And I think changing the ticker symbol makes a lot of sense now because it's almost symbolic of the change that's happening.
And then I know there's a lot to say on this next question, and we don't have to get too technical, but like, how do you compare Polygon to the other popular Ethereum L2s? Because there are prominent ones, there are more coming. Like, where does Polygon fit in?
Yeah, see, from a technical perspective, it's funny because a lot of the Ethereum virtual machine compatible chains or EVM compatible chains that are out there, say the competing L1s, let's say the avalanches of the world. Then you think about the L2s. There's Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Sync, all these different things. And a lot of them are just different flavors of largely the same design principles. And it's an evolution in a sense of, like the 2017 era, where you had a bunch of different chains that were all doing basically the same thing, but they were just optimizing for one parameter of the blockchain trilemma: scalability, security, decentralization. You make a choice. Which ones do I prioritize and why? Now we're kind of in this place where there's all these different technologies to choose from. And there are now, even in just zero knowledge, there's like a bunch of different approaches that are being used. And so each of these chains is taking their pick. This is the one that I think this is the recipe with all the ingredients we have that makes the best ecosystem for people to build on, because it needs to be easy for builders, or else there's nothing for people to be drawn by. No users are going to show up. But then it also needs to be easy enough for users to use. You can't just be a builder focused ecosystem either. And that's really hard to accomplish. And I think that's, in a way, putting the technology decisions aside, because there's a lot of similarities between all the different chains out there in that front, nowadays at least, what Polygon has done really well is bringing both of those things together, making it easy enough for users to use the things, but being focused enough on builders that there are things to use, and incubating mostly the right things. Obviously that's subjective, but incubating mostly the right things in their space, and not ignoring things like identity and wallets and things for the future that some other chains might be ignoring a little bit. Governance is the one they're going to have to really solve, in my opinion. Making people feel confident in the future of governance on Polygon, which is where people have had question marks in the past. I have to trust validators. Is that still the case? Is everything run by a multi-sig? Is that still the case? How do you defend against all these different attack vectors? So it's not always they're 100% ready to go, everything's perfect. It's a work in progress.
And then let's talk about your thoughts for the future of Polygon.
Yeah.
Say 5 years, where's Polygon going to be? Or maybe like where's like ETH L2 ecosystem as a whole, but specifically Polygon?
I personally believe that we are trending in the direction of Ethereum looking architecturally not so dissimilar to what Polygon is trying to do with Polygon 2.0. And I think we're moving in a direction where there's a, pun intended, consensus amongst all of these different projects in the EVM space around, here's the protocol design stack that is interoperable pretty much universally between all these different flavors and projects and protocols. And you start to have this really connected and diverse set of EVM compatible, you could call them, ZK EVMs, you call them what you want, but compatible networks that are deeply, deeply, deeply connected to each other. And it needs to be in a way that people don't know what's happening behind the scenes. Just like, you and I were talking on a video chat platform. You and I don't really care all that much what's happening behind the scenes. Of course, I might think about it because that's the way my brain works, but most people don't care. And I think that that's ultimately where, in 5 years, to be honest, 5 years is a light year in crypto. It's a light year in technology. In 5 years, if we haven't gotten to the point where the average user, my mom or my son, who will be 6 years old or whatever, if they can't use this stuff without having to be super technical, then I think we've failed. And I think that that's what Polygon and Ethereum and a lot of these other chains are really focused on. How do we get to that point? So I'll be optimistic and say that's where we are. One wallet, account abstraction. You can do all these cool things in your digital economy without knowing whether you're using Polygon or Ethereum or one of the L2s.
You sound bullish. I like that. Polygon price prediction?
Oh, shoot, man. That's the hardest question. If I had the answer to that question for real, then I would be like on a beach somewhere and not caring about working. But I think for me, it is conceivable to say that, 5 years, it's an impossible prediction. But in this next, let's say this next phase of, we get Polygon 2.0, we get some degree of sense back into the space with regard to regulatory chaos and all the lawsuits and all the turmoil. Maybe Bitcoin wakes up and starts doing what we think it's going to do with the halving. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that Polygon doesn't make its way back to all-time high from previous. And that's a really hard feat to accomplish for an altcoin, to be honest, because if you look at history, the bull and bear cycles, most altcoins that drop 90%, drop 80%, even 50, never touch that spot ever again. And so I think that that's the highest praise you can give an altcoin, which is I think it could make its way back to its all-time high. Beyond that, it's really hard to predict. And even that is a probability dice roll.
I like it. You keep things real. base case, in your opinion, and nobody knows the future, back to all-time high at least. I like that. Hashoshi,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us today.
Sure. Thanks.